So, okay. Tell me about this new tent. What do you got coming? Are you designing? You're what can you reveal? What can you share with us about this
It's a
Zenbivy tent?
it keeps well. I've been trying to develop tents for Zenbivy for several years,
Okay.
and I've developed 3.
Because he was going to bring it.
I was going to bring the tent, and
He
it's
was.
not ready. It's not ready.
Not. He didn't.
It's not here. It's being made though.
Okay. Oh.
So
okay.
they are making 20 of them. So it's what we call SMS run. It stands for salesman samples, even though we don't have salesmen. But it's like when you get stuff before it gets launched or whatever, it comes from that little run.
Yeah.
And so we are doing that run. But I've tried to develop a few tents, 2-person tents. They've all been. And thinking this is going to be the trekking pole tent, that's going to take over the world and redefine. And but none of them have been that good, and so we haven't come out with them. And after a while, this design that we have been working on is very old, and there are some older people who I know who I keep seeing that tent showing up on trips, and it's like, this tent is old. And I'd ask them, why did you bring this? Why did you bring this? And these are people who've done tents, worked in the industry, and I'm like, I just need to finish this. So it was a tent that it was originally designed by Mark Twight, who's an alpinist. He wrote the book Extreme Alpinism, and it was designed as, on Himalayan faces. They're climbing these 50-degree Himalayan faces, and they need to set up their camp, and they will chop out a ledge for their tent right in the middle of a steep face. And then they'll put their, at this time, Bibbler Eye tent or whatever on that little ledge, and then Spindrift comes down the mountain and pushes the tent off.
Okay.
And so his idea was, we're going to cut out this little ledge. Let's just fill the whole ledge in, and we'll bury a little flap uphill, so when the Spindrift comes off, it'll just fly off, and this tent will have no poles. And I was like, okay, we'll make that for you. And so we made the prototype for that tent, and it was basically a triangular little tent with a flap. And when we got it to MSR, we didn't know there was no way to set it up because we didn't have a Himalayan face to stick it in. So we stuck trekking poles underneath it, and that little flap came down and became an awning. And at that point, the awning wasn't over the door, but I immediately saw this advantage of sleeping under this tarp. It was essentially a tarp. And if you'll notice, the tents we did at Sierra Designs, the Flash and the Lightning, and every tent we did at Sierra Designs, they all had awnings over the doorway, and there was no vestibules in front of the doorway. And they were all based on this original design of having an awning over the doorway. When you put an awning over the doorway changes. It's now not just the doorway, but it becomes a big window. It becomes a huge vent that you can leave open and ventilate. And so I've always been intrigued with that sort of style, and it happened to us because we were developing something else. So we developed a tent at the time called the Missing Link, and it was called the Missing Link because it was the first tarp tent. It was the first tent that used trekking poles, was single wall, and had the whole body sort of built into it, which of course is very common now. But this was the very first one that I'm aware of that ever did that. And we only did one, it was late and we only did one iteration and was like, okay, let's make that. And so it was never quite done. But it launched. Okay. It won a Backpackers Editor's Choice Award.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, this style tent is going to take over the world. People are going to be using trekking pole tents and not freestanding tents. But that was not true. That's true now, but it wasn't true then, and it wasn't true for many, many years after. And in fact, if you still go to the regular retail world, I'm sure they'll still tell you that you can't sell a tent that's not freestanding. It needs to be freestanding. That's what people want.
Yeah.
And yet, when I go out on the trail,
everybody's got a trekking pole tent. Most people, a lot of people.
It's
50-50. It feels like.
You're not a weird guy with your trekking pole tent. Everybody gets it, right? Okay, you're using your trekking pole tents to put up the shelter, but back then it was not common, And the original missing link, if you look it up online, was orange, and it was strange looking. And they tried to fix it afterwards and then I got fired. We were going to fix it, and not fix it. It was fine, but optimize it. I got fired, and then they worked on it after I did, and they made it worse, heavier. And then that one got discontinued. That was called the something. And then they did another one where they switched it around and the heads were at the door, and that was a disaster. I saw it in their trade show booth, and I just laughed and laughed and laughed. And I was like, and I could tell by looking at it, it was going to collect water and snow and collapse if it rained. And I could tell they'd never taken it out. And I could tell by looking. And I thought, you guys have fallen a long way. Yeah. And they did launch it that way. I didn't tell them. I probably should have. But I just, I'm not going to walk in there afterwards and say, you should do it my way. Yeah. Although that's what I want to do. I admitted to it earlier. I want to tell everybody that. But they had to drop that because it, and that tent has now gone away for them. And so it's based on that. It's based on that because I kept seeing it coming up on trips. And then when people would tell me why they used it, I was like, yeah, that's exactly right. Every tent ought to do that. And why we're not doing that. So on trips that aren't lightweight, I see it because that style of tent is designed to camp out of. See, the reason I don't think it's very commercial is guys like you. I look at you on YouTube and I was like, it's like two, three friends, and they're all bringing their own two-person tent. And then when they get to the campsite, they set up the tent, they stand around it, they talk about it, but then when they go to cook or whatever, they sit in their chairs over here or whatever, and they're not really camping out of the tent. The tent is just the bedroom.
Oh, for sure.
Right. Then you just go to that when you go to bed, and you get in it, and then you get up in the morning. Well, any tent can do that. And then if it's not raining or buggy, you don't need the tent at all.
Right.
So the tent is sort of superfluous. But when it's raining, most tents on the market are terrible to be in. And so people don't go. One of the reasons people don't go in the rain is because they think they're going to suffer. One of the reasons I go during the rain is because I know I'm going to be alone. And even if it's like a little bit of rain, there's nobody out there.
Yeah.
No one's wanting to go because they think, oh, it's going to be miserable. Well, in my opinion, they just don't have the right gear because you can be comfortable in the rain day after day after day after day if you have sort of a plan around how you're going to do it. And so you can camp out of these tents, and they are comfortable to camp out of. And you can see. The other thing I hate about most tents is that every Big Agnes tent, when you open the door to get in it, water goes directly into the tent if it's raining. Every one of their styles. So to me, every one of their styles is defective. I think you got to be able to open the door and get in and out in the rain. You'd be surprised how few tents you can just open the door and get in and out of in the rain.
Yeah, for sure.
Because they just have it angled over the doorway. And then when it is raining, you have to have it completely sealed up. So you're in there, it doesn't ventilate, it doesn't do anything. You're just in there completely sealed up, and it's miserable. You can't see outside. So I think in a tent, you have to be able to see outside when the weather's bad. You got to be able to remain connected to the outdoors. If you're getting to camp at 6 o'clock and it's pouring rain and you're going to go to bed at 9:30 or 10 o'clock, you have to be able to enjoy the experience. Yep. I want to still connect and see the views and hear the rain and see what's going on and have my tea and sit comfortably and not feel like I'm in like a little tomb, either alone or worse, with you right there.
Right,
sitting right next to me, like, isn't this great? Isn't this fun that we went backpacking, and now what are we going to do for the next 4 hours? I'm going to breathe your exhale. Mm-hmm. I'm going to inhale your exhale. That sounds like fun.
Yeah, right.
Thank God I got the AirPods.
Yeah,
I can, those work in all tents now, and I don't have to listen to you. But so that's sort of the genesis of the tent. And it was also done, I mentioned now 3 or 4 times, Jim Giblin. He and I designed that tent together, and I feel like I want to finish it. He has early onset dementia.
Oh.
And is no longer working and speaking, and it'll eventually take his life. And so
that's tough.
I get emotional about it.
Yeah.
So Yeah, I want to finish it for that reason.
Yeah, I think it's great. That's great. He's an icon.
Yeah, and important to me, an important friend. And I just feel like it's, this tent keeps coming back and keeps coming back. And normally I wouldn't do it because MSR, it's kind of, when you see it, it's not going to be, it's way better, obviously, but it's not going to be, it's going to be based on an MSR style that has been sort of dropped. And normally I'd be like, I don't want to do anything that's like, associated with some other brand. But in this case, I feel like it's mine, and I want to finish it. And I want to finish it just because I think it's great, and because, it's something that Jim and I worked on together that I feel like needs to be completed before my career ends.
Yeah.
So,
do you feel like you're in a rush to complete it right now, for that reason that you just said? You feel like this is like...
Yes, because I know he doesn't have much more time.
Yeah.
And I want to finish it before the end. And so, I feel like a little bit of a rush, and to make it good enough.
Yeah.
So
you want him to see it. You want him to experience it. You want him to...
I've showed it to him, but he can't respond. So you don't know whether he sees it or recognizes it. You just don't know what they're thinking or what they're able to. Yeah. It's very frustrating for friends and his mother, especially, obviously. And so, And I just think it's for people who are going, who just go, who's like, I'm going, June 18th. And if it's raining June 18th, I'm going June 18th.
Right.
I think you should just have a tent that works in all the weather. So it's if it were raining, I guarantee it's the most comfortable tent that you could be sleeping in, because it doesn't disconnect you from the outdoors. It doesn't keep you from cooking. There's no different living in it when it's raining than when it's not raining. And with every other shelter, you have to configure it for raining, right? I'm going to close up the doors. I'm going to, close up the windows. I'm going to seal myself in. All the things that, like in the mummy bag, I didn't want to do, and I don't want to do it in the tent either.
Right. I have a picture of a tent in my head, and I don't think it's anything what it looks like.
The reason that I'm not bullish on it is like it's a tarp. Yeah. And so it has strings.
That's what
everywhere.
I was picturing.
When you say like the footprint, it's like, what's the footprint? Is like a gazillion. I don't know what the footprint is. Huge, 50 feet that way, 50 feet that way. It's a tarp. It's literally a.
It's
tarp.
Not 50 feet in every direction.
It's not.
Somebody's going to be like, what?
But you definitely have to have it's a different mindset.
Yeah.
And I've historically thought people won't do this. It's. They're too hard to set up. And, Durston has really been inspiring, because even though I think of that tent as being old in its design, it's captured people's imagination and it is not an easy tent to set up. I mean, we can all say, I can set it up or whatever, but for the first time user,
nobody can
cattywampus is, that when he sleeps.
Yeah, case in point, I took people backpacking in the Smokies last week, and my buddy used the Durston tent for the first time. I have set it up, and because I'm an outdoor guy, I know how to set up those. It's easy for me to set up. I'm like, this is way easier than most of the other trekking pole tents. Yeah, he was like, you got to help me, man. I can't figure this out.
He's like, what is going on?
Yeah, where's the door? What's this? How do you do that?
That goes that way. Yeah, you have to kind of get oriented. But once you do, you can figure it out.
Yes. So it's a great tent.
So it's inspiring to me in that way. It's like people will use trekking pole tents. People will figure out how to set them up. It ain't that hard to set them up. People can get the stakes in the ground. All the things that people are fearful of. Yeah, that's one of the main reasons people use a freestanding tent, is they're afraid they're not going to be able to get the stake in the ground, and that the tent's going to fall down on them in the middle of the night. And so they feel more secure in a freestanding tent. But boy, the weight you carry for that, to get the poles to all of it's just wasted weight to get the poles to the corner. That's why I don't use a freestanding tent, because I'm lazy. I want to be comfortable on the trail, and you don't put weight into something that doesn't make the experience better, right? It does make it maybe a little easier to set up, and I can pick it up and move over here and whatever, but I can also unstake my other tent and slide it over
right,
there if I want
right.
to.
Yeah.
It's not. So that mindset seems to have shifted for people, and people recognize, hey, I can get something that is comfortable and functional at a fraction of the weight. I mean, with the DCF tents now, I mean, it's insane.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Thanks for watching this podcast clip. If you want to watch the full podcast, click right here. If you want to watch what YouTube recommends, click right here. Or if you want to download my backpacking course where you can learn how to backpack really, really easily, click right here.